Okay. So welcome everyone. I am so excited to see all of your faces and to hear so many voices. I feel like it's been such a long time since we've all connected, since the last time we saw each other was the beginning of March, and it is now the end of April, which I can hardly believe. Time flies so quickly. So before we dive in with some introductions and then get started with our discussion, because it's been basically a month and a half since we have all connected, I just want to start out by sharing a sentence or two about what Funders Together has been up to since the March convening. And before I do that, also just want to point out that if you are not talking, if you can mute yourself, that would be great, just to prevent feedback and sort of background noise. So what have we been up to in the past week since the March convening? We spent some time synthesizing all of the notes and flip chart paper and post-it notes from our time together in March, and trying to make some sense of what all of you told us that you wanted to learn and grapple with. And then we also did some thinking about sort of the sequencing of those things, and what experts we could bring in to help us tackle some of those big questions. And so Amanda and I have sort of been mapping out programming for the rest of the year. We've started reaching out to a couple of partners that we're in conversations with, and hopefully we'll be bringing them in to lead some training and discussions with us. We've also been thinking a lot about not just programming topics, but also the structure of this learning community. One of the questions that you left us with on the last day of our time together in March was how we would all be accountable to each other. And so I've been sort of looking at all of the participants and trying to come up with some home teams or accountability groups that I'll talk a little bit more about at the end of this call. And then I've also been working with my colleague Tabaisa to plan our October convening in Chicago. And so we've landed on dates with that, and we've been sort of putting together an agenda on that. So I'll get into a little bit more detail about all of that at the end of this call. But that's what we've been up to on our end. I know that all of you have been super busy, because spring always seems to be like the busiest month for everybody. But I am really excited for the next 90 minutes of this call. We're going to be focusing on centering people with lived experience. And I wanted to just share that the reason why we're starting out with this topic as the focus for this call is because it's a topic that many of you lifted up during our time together in March as sort of like one of the most important things that we need to sort of figure out, learn about, implement, do in order to advance racial equity and ending homelessness. And so this is a lot of the discussion questions we have today were taken from questions from our pre-calls, questions from the post-it notes from our time together in March, and then some questions that we've also been brainstorming ourselves. So before I turn it over to Tina, who's going to lead us through introductions, I just wanted to share a little bit about how we'd like all of you to participate during this call, since there are a lot of people in this group. So we're trying to experiment with ways to have everyone be able to chime in without having like 30 people talk over each other, or without having like no one chime in because everyone's waiting for someone else to chime in. So if you were in Portland in March, you'll remember that Tina did a really excellent job sort of like teeing up, you'll speak and then you'll speak and then you'll speak and then we'll hear from you next. So she's going to try to do that on this call. So if you are on webcam and you would want to chime in next, just give us a wave and she'll jot down your name. If you have access to your computer, you can also like type in the chat box like have a question or I have a comment or I want to share something, and she'll also tee that up. And then also, if you're just calling in, but you also want to chime in, you can feel free to give her a text. I included her cell phone number in the agenda, and I'll also put it in the chat box. Or you could just unmute yourself and sort of interject if that's easiest. So I am now going to turn it over to Tina Gridiron. For those of you, see you, Lisa. For those of you who were not with us in March, Tina is with the Giving Practice, and she was an amazing facilitator, and she'll be co-facilitating this call with me. So I'm really excited. Before I do that, I saw that you had a hand raised, Lisa. If you want to, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry. I was trying to figure out if because you said put it on message or chat. Is it on chat? My boxes sometimes come and go, and I'm not very techie. So is it on chat? Like if we have a comment or something, you want us to put it in the chat thing?
Yeah. So at the bottom of it should be at the bottom of your screen. Do you have like a little button that says chat?
Sometimes.
If you don't, just wave. You are on video, so it makes it great for us to be able to tee up for you to share.
Yeah.
I know, but now I'm obsessing over looking at myself. I might have to turn myself off because I'm like, if I don't pay attention, I'm just staring at my beautiful, very wild curly hair today.
Your hair is beautiful. You have nothing to worry about. Yeah, if you can also, I will also put these instructions in the chat box, and if you can find the chat box, great. If you can't, then I will feel free to send me an email and we can do that offline. So, all right. Tina, do you want to take it away?
Yes, happy to. So it's great to see so many faces, getting a chance to reconnect again. I know that some of you are getting a little bit of background. So just as a healthy practice, if we can mute, and then when you have something to share, unmute, that would be great. In order to just connect voices and to do a little bit of bonding, if you will, on this video call, we'd like to go through a roll call and ask each person of all the things that you're working on, of all the things that you're doing right now with your foundation, in 30 seconds, can you share one thing that you're most excited about, or one thing that is bringing you a lot of joy at work, to just kind of level set and hear voices and connect with everyone on the line. And because there's so many folks, I figured we would just do some roll calling. And if someone's on the call from that organization, then they can jump right in, unmute, and then share 30 seconds and mute back. So we're trying to do this as a quick rapid fire, get to know you time. So the first one on my list is Cisco. And I think do we have Kelly from Cisco? No. Then we're gonna go to Meyer Memorial Trust. Do we have Michael or Lisa or Jody?
Yeah, do you wanna go first, Lisa?
Yes, I'm actually excited. Right after this meeting, we are going to have our final review. I don't know if I'm stepping on Michael's toes here and taking his thunder, but we're about to make some final recommendations for some advocacy awards, and Michael's done an amazing job of really advocating to. He's been very catchy. Let's get out $1 million for advocacy. So I'm excited about that.
Way to go, Michael.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I mean, it's not public knowledge yet. We're not quite there, but I think we're going to have an announcement in the next few months about $1 million in advocacy over the next couple of years.
Awesome. Is Jody with us? Nope. Then we'll go to the Rakes Foundation, Katie and Casey.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to.
Katie, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Casey. Good morning. Good afternoon. It's great to be here with everybody and see so many faces on the video screen. Yeah, I know it's funny. Is it bringing me joy? I feel like we're supporting really important work right now, but it feels really hard. But it's important work of trying to get alignment in terms of how our region of Seattle-King County is helping to solve the homelessness crisis and do it and this topic of really centering on customers and people with lived experience is something that our community is intentionally really trying to do. So it feels exciting, and right now it feels really hard because the fragmentation is really real. And so I'm feeling a lot of the pain points around that. But the one thing I was thinking about this community is that I did get the letter. Yay, Tina, that you helped to facilitate, the person who wrote me the nice letter about a month ago. And it was really great to like get that after it made the community like last. So it was a nice gesture, and I just want to give a thumbs up to that.
Excellent. Very good. Casey?
Let's see, a small thing. We funded a racial equity fellow at one of our key grantees. And it was a total mess for a while. It hasn't even started yet, but the process was a total mess. And thanks to our fantastic grantee, they kind of pulled this one out of the ashes. And the response from the partners in the youth homelessness work in King County has been really fantastic. Really a lot of excitement, and I think a lot of excitement from the grantee about the opportunity for this fellow both to lead from behind, lead the work in terms of racial equity from behind, as well as push the organization itself in terms of how it's thinking about its internal work on racial equity. And I think there will be a tertiary effect of that fellow that we funded also pushing. I don't know if folks can still hear me, but pushing the Rakes Foundation as well in terms of our work.
Very good. Thank you for sharing. We're going to move to the Rasmussen Foundation. Todd or Dick?
Hi. Hey, this is Todd. And I would say, so we got to have a lot of stuff going on right now. Our board has committed about $10 million to help do this systems work around ending homelessness here in Anchorage and around the state. I think we're in the process of bringing in at least 2 other pretty sizable commitments to join in that work. So that's really exciting. And you know, the process of trying to figure out how we can really end the homelessness here is really daunting. Like, what are all the moving pieces and parts of that, and what are the best ways to leverage our investments? So I think the most exciting thing at the moment for me as it relates to our conversation today is that there's an interagency working group out of DC that's focused on homelessness and housing instability for American Indian and Alaska Native communities, and they've been planning a convening here in Anchorage on May 21st and 22nd, and I'm on the planning team for that work. And so we're really excited to be bringing in 3 communities from outside and then 4 communities from here in Alaska to really hear from folks in communities and on the ground about what's working well and what are the challenges around homelessness in those communities. And I think that for us, you know, centering this conversation is also a really important part of our strategic plan, our 3-year strategic plan. And this morning we were just talking about, again, kind of how to really dig in. And I appreciate the reading that we did for this call, because I feel like it's one thing to say we want to center the voices of those with lived experience, and it's another to figure out what are the strategies to kind of actualize that. So we're working on that right now.
Thanks a bunch, Todd. Remember, if you are not speaking, to mute your line, just to take care of a little bit of the background noise. Is Dick on the line? No. Then, yes?
No.
No. Then we'll move to the Tipping Point community. We've got Myra, Debbie, Andrea. Anybody with us?
It's Myra. Hi.
Hi.
So I think the 3 things that I'm most excited about, first being that my white paper was published, which is called The Voices from the Outside. And I should share it with you all. I shared it with Stephanie, but I should share it with the group. And I just need to remember how to share it. And the other thing that I wanted to share was my proposal for the advisory board got approved. So I am actively doing outreach at the moment for folks with lived experience to really chime in into our strategies. And then finally, I am co-chair of our DE&I working group, which is really moving our diversity, equity, and inclusion work across the organization. So it's a big role, and I'm really excited to move it forward.
Excellent. Debbie or Andrea?
Debbie and Andrea are not here.
Andrea, my apologies. Thank you. All right, then we'll go to the Rocky Mountain region. Anyone from the Denver Foundation?
Yes, I'm here.
Raise your hands, Julie.
Can you see me already?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
You can tell I'm not used to doing this very much. I guess there are two kind of exciting things happening. One, I've, for the last, 3 years, been doing public will building around homelessness with a big group of grantees and kind of working right alongside them. We are sort of transitioning into a different space with that work. So this year we're kicking off what we're calling a solutions mapping campaign. Well, it's not really a campaign, it's actually a research project, but we're involving the people who have been working with us in public will building. A large kind of heart of that campaign is the Storytellers Network, which is people with lived experience who have leadership grants and have been helping move and drive this work. But we're going to be mapping deep community-based responses to homelessness, like community navigation, community organizing, the little churches on the corner that are doing things, and really trying to, frankly, kind of looking at the Seattle report, start with the most impacted individuals and their voices, and then sort of build on up to the tiers where we're going to be surveying advocacy, policymakers, as well as direct service providers. So that research is getting started, and we're super excited about it.
Excellent, very exciting. Thanks for sharing, Julie. We'll move to the Southwest region. We've got the United Way of Metropolitan Dallas. Is Vanessa on the line?
Wrong name.
All right, well, is there someone else?
I'm Ashley. Ashley's here in Nissy.
Yay. Well, Ashley, we're in your hands.
Okay, so I would say for us right now, we are right smack in the middle of our big 3-year grant process. So going out on site visits, visiting agencies, and figuring out who we're going to fund next, which is probably the biggest thing we've got going on right now that I'm excited about.
Thanks for sharing. Missy?
Sure. Sorry.
It's okay.
Somebody's very talkative. We kicked off our racial equity in homelessness with our local COC just a few months ago. We've had a couple of meetings, and we've actually identified what we're going to do, which is around educating individuals in the community and one of our service providers around racial equity and kind of acknowledging that whole process. So it's really exciting work, and it's exciting to bring it to Dallas.
Thanks for sharing, Missy. An adorable little one. So glad that you're with us. Why don't we turn to the Valley of the Sun United Way? Anyone on the line? Cricket?
Hi, it's Cricket.
Welcome.
Yep. Hi. I have so much exciting stuff, so I'm trying to pick one thing. So I think the thing that I'm focused on this week, and why I'm so happy we're having this phone call, is our leadership has agreed that voices of lived experience should sit on the funding review panel, which took some doing. And so we are, I'm so excited to be able to not only incorporate them in voice of lived experience in our funding application review process, but to be able to pay them for their time. So we really haven't done this before like this. And so I'm just excited for the learning that will occur, and what we'll be able to figure out how to do better in the future, and most importantly, the impact I think it will have on the corporate volunteers that sit on those review panels.
Very exciting. Thanks for sharing, Cricket. Very exciting. You'll have lots to share with us as we move along this journey. Why don't we turn to the Midwest now? We're going to go with the Crown Family Philanthropies, then the Polad Family Foundation, in that order. Crown Family Philanthropies? All right. the Polad Family Foundation or Polad Family Foundation. I apologize if I'm butchering the name.
No, you're good. This is Courtney. Can you hear me?
Yes, Courtney.
Okay, you guys can't see me, but I look fabulous today, so just imagine it.
You sound fabulous too.
Yes, thank you. So we are very busy with a new housing affordability program, but I think the thing that I would say that I'm the most excited about right now is we are working with the most populous county that includes Minneapolis around an emergency assistance redesign with a person-centered design process that puts the customer at the center, and how to make sure that the county is listening to those with the most expertise, which in particular Black women with children.
Excellent. Excellent. Very exciting. So then we're going to go from the Polk Brothers to Sisters of Charity Foundation of Cleveland. So in the Polk Brothers Foundation, Debbie or Deborah? Debbie Bennett?
Yeah, I'll go first because we're both on.
Okay.
So Christy Prowl from Crown is not on the call today because she has a deadline coming up. But the thing that I'm most excited about is that Christy and I work together for our foundations to invest some of our youth homelessness resources in a new joint RFP that we put together, having a series of meetings with young people. Deborah's coming in. I'm like, who's coming in my office? A series of meetings with young people from our youth advisory board to ask them what they thought that we should be investing in, and it's a $500,000 initiative, and we are prioritizing funding for programs that prioritize youth leadership and youth involvement. And they had some really terrific ideas, things that we had not thought about funding before. And we're also prioritizing two things. One is intersectional work within youth homelessness in Chicago. So a lot of the organizations, even though they're seeing the same young people, they're not working closely together. And we build that structure. And then also to engage some of the folks who are working with young people, but they're not in our traditional conversations. And then how do we engage some of the sectors that are currently working with us? So for $500,000, we're going to do all that.
Am I here?
You are.
Yes.
Hear me? All right. This is Deborah. And so I'm excited. Top of mind, I just came from our new mayor-elect's housing transition team. And some policies that are being put forward is a graduated real estate transfer tax, the revenues from which will be used for developing housing for people experiencing homelessness and also funding services. And also this administration has committed to being very explicit about racial equity and accountability and transparency. And so I put forward the report that just came out of Los Angeles as an example
that's awesome.
of a way that a city or a county has done that. So
that's great.
Very exciting. Sisters of Charity Foundation of Cleveland. Adrienne or Angela?
Hi, everyone. This is Angela. I apologize that I didn't get the chance to meet many of you in Portland in March. I think what I'm most excited about right now in our work around homelessness is the opportunity to create a new drop-in center for youth experiencing homelessness, and in doing that, sort of reimagining our coordinated entry process for young adults and increasing access to that system. And this is a priority that's really been identified by our Youth Action Board. They've really been the champions behind this and really driving it forward. So we have a state appropriation pending right now, a $1.6 million appropriation over the 2-year biennium, and we'll know by the end of June whether or not that will be successful. But we've identified strong legislative support for that state appropriation request, and we're really looking forward to increasing in a more hospitable way our services to young adults experiencing homelessness in Cleveland.
Very exciting, very exciting. Is Adrian with us?
Yeah, and I'll share a different example. Our foundation made the shift from focusing on education and on health in one neighborhood to really looking upstream and addressing, looking at how to break the cycle of poverty among families.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're getting ready to, think about what that means, we're looking at how we can really use bring resident and partner voices into the design and the data process through participatory data or research and action. So I'm excited about reading what I read for this call and thinking about how that translates into other sectors of our work.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing, Adrienne. We're going to move to the Southeast and go with the United Way of Miami-Dade. Is Vanessa on the line? Okay, and we're going to go to the Northeast, Health Spark Foundation, then the Melville Charitable Trust. So do we have Russell from the Health Spark Foundation?
You do, and I apologize for background noise. I'm standing in a train station.
You're good.
So real quickly, our grant committee is meeting in about a week, and we're going to look at an opportunity to take recommendations that we're expecting from the Spark team in June and create a new grant initiative specifically focused around racial equity investment. So these will be capacity building grants to organizations that are either direct service providers in housing and homelessness or counseling people through the prevention program. So that's one thing. And then obviously the report that I'm just alluding to is the second phase of the Spark work that's really going to be doing a national scan that we'll be happy to share with you later this summer when it's done on emerging best practices, promising practices, just practices around racial equity, with a particular focus on communities that are prioritizing services to racial groups. So in our particular community, we have a disproportionate use of our homeless program by African American women with young children 0 to 5. So we're trying to figure out if and how we create priorities to service that population upstream, prevent them from coming into the system, and if they come into the system, to fast track them out.
Great work, Russell. Thank you for sharing. Do we have someone from the Melville Charitable Trust? Becca, Susan, Amy?
Yep. Becca's here. Susan, you gonna go?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that. I was on mute.
Got it.
This is Susan, and I'm excited about a couple things. One is a couple months ago, we did a survey of all of our grantees, national and Connecticut, on just where they were, if anywhere, on racial equity within their organization. We got the results back. We got great response. And so we have figured out how we're going to support our national grantees and how we're going to support our local grantees. So excited about that. And then we also have now an internal framework how we're going to address racial equity at the trust in the way that we operate, every way from internal all the way through our initiatives that we're doing. And so we're getting a coach, a racial equity coach, to help us with that. So I'm excited about that. And then there's a group of Connecticut funders, plus JP Morgan Chase, who has a piece of this territory, that are meeting in 2 weeks. It will be our third meeting to talk about a shared strategy. We're all interested in racial equity and extremely low-income families in Connecticut.
Excellent. Becca?
Hi, this is Becca. Hi, everybody. I am excited to start conversations with the Reaching Home campaign in Connecticut to incorporate people with lived experience to the work that they do. The timing is not for a lack of interest over the past couple of years to do it. It's just kind of been the bandwidth and the right people at the right places at the right time. And I am thrilled that the conversations have started to percolate. And next week is one of the bigger, like, okay, now what do we do? So I am thrilled to be able to be part of that. That's it.
Excellent. Thanks. Amy on the line? All right, then all right. We'll go with the national and international groups. We have the PetSmart Charities and United Way Worldwide and Oak Foundation in that order. So PetSmart Charities.
Hi there, you have Danny from PetSmart Charities. I'm going to go micro level with what I'm really excited about. So we have been invited to visit a community that's a grantee. It's an Indigenous community in Alberta called Muskayskis. And they've invited us to see some of their programming and be welcomed by their elders. So we're just thrilled about that. And in advance of visiting the community, we're also doing some Indigenous training with a consultant called Bear Standing Tall, who will be coming and working with a number of us from the foundation. So we're really excited about that. That's happening at the beginning of May. So we're just thrilled with that.
Great work. Exciting, definitely. Is Seema with us? All right, then we'll go to United Way Worldwide. Alicia or Matthew?
Yes. Okay, I was on double mute. I don't think Alicia can join us today. There's a big United Way conference going on. But I'm very excited that internal to our building and our worldwide organization, equity has multiple now starting to interweave threads. We have a D&I grant, we have a health equity grant, we're building a framework that's connecting them. So it's nice to see energy from multiple teams in multiple directions, maintaining its strength and building. And then the other thing that's giving me particular joy this week is I just keep hearing about plans and needs and thinking about storytelling and how United Way can tell new stories. And to me, that is setting the groundwork for us to add new voices, new perspectives, lived experience. So I think we have a lot of positive opportunities ahead of us.
Exciting. Thanks so much. Why don't we move to the Oak Foundation? Paul or Amanda?
It's Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, great. Hello. Well, I sort of start off with a bit of a confession. I mean, perhaps you can tell from my my accent, I'm a sort of transatlantic interloper, and so it's my first meeting, and somebody else mentioned the deadline. And I've had a deadline today, actually. So I haven't been able to, I'm new to the program, so bear with me while I get up to speed. So if that's okay. And I think you were asking, because I missed the first few minutes of the call, my apologies. I think you were asking for things that were exciting. Is that right, that are going on in your foundation?
Correct. In 30 seconds or less, what is exciting right now on your plate?
Okay, right, 30 seconds or less, right, okay. Well, there are 2 or 3 grants that I'm involved with and are just going to be considered by our trustees at the moment, which also have an overlap with some of the issues that we're considering here in this group. One is in Wales, the Welsh Refugee Council, and they're doing fantastic work with asylum seekers and refugees, and we're supporting them an application to go to trustees around a resettlement housing service, and also to increase their capacity around evaluation and impact measurement. We're also investigating a project that we've made an initial grant to. It's UGIMA project in Boston, and that's delivered by well, in close association with City Life Vida Obama, and that's the aim is to create a sort of alternative financial and sort of social ecosystem by developing community loans to socially concerned and locally based businesses in Boston, many of whom are owned by people of colour. And so we're looking to make a second grant after initial pilot grants. So it's really exciting that that's looking like that's going ahead. We are also building on a model that was developed in the States, which is pro bono support to children, undocumented children, to resolve their immigration status. Kind US, I think it's called, supported by Microsoft, and they've been working with some organisations that we have some contact with over here in England, and we're looking to expand that model there to regularize the status of undocumented children, and so that they then have access to a whole range of benefits, education and jobs, and etc. So that's really exciting. Oh, and also one program we're involved with, which is essentially, it's a drive. It's called 2027. It's a drive by an organisation that is seeking to address the lack of working class representation within foundations and eventually at board level. And essentially it's like a supported placement scheme, and it started off small, and they started off with 10 people after quite a difficult competitive process to place people from a working class background into foundations, and we're looking to take part in the second round of those placements. And about 70 to 80% of those placements are people of colour or minority ethnic groups.
Thank you so much. For those of you who have been watching, I think my colleague Seema is on the line, but the mute-unmute process wasn't working for us. Seema, are you able to share a few comments? Okay, we're going to move on, but for those of you who are keeping track of the chat room, yes, Stephanie?
Seema just, not Slack me, chatted me that she is excited about their new partnership with the National Alliance to End Homelessness to study the challenges with people experiencing homelessness and their pets in the US and in Canada. So Seema, thanks for sharing that over chat.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think Myra has a guest with her that is on the video now. And so if you would like to share something that is exciting you about the work, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. This is Debbie Koski, and I believe Myra already shared with you that we are developing an advisory committee. So I think that's what I'm most excited about.
Fair enough. I just want to make sure that we have all the voices and all the faces involved. For those of you who have been watching the chat box, there have been a lot of moments where people have been energized by some of the work that has already been shared on this call. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on the chat box, because it's also giving us an opportunity to connect the dots. One of the reasons why we join a community of practice is because we want to learn from, hear from, be strengthened by all the great ideas that are on this call. So thank you everyone for being transparent and willing to share what is exciting right now on your plate. 2, thanks folks for making connections in the chat box. 3, thanks for agreeing to be in this, face-to-face moment and to endure looking at yourself throughout the entire call. It matters. Seeing your smiles and your head nods means that folks are engaged. So we're trying this out, and even those of you who are not face-to-face, we just appreciate you jumping in with both feet. We're going to turn now and just do a little bit of review. During our meeting in March, we spent some time just setting group norms. And I know that my colleague Stephanie has the group norms that we established when we met each other face to face. We want to bring those back to the forefront. We want to reconnect with those so that everyone gets a sense of, even our new folks on the line, this might be your first call. We are excited about everyone being present, actively listening, respectful of one another, open to disagreement, honoring confidentiality, being willing to ask hard questions. For those of you who are wondering why I'm reading these, we have some people on the phone that may not see them in front of them right now. So we are committed to recognize that our first response might not always be our best response. So we're going to give each other the opportunity to have an oops or an ouch, and to lean in and ask for more clarification when we're talking about these elements of race equity and diversity. We want to tolerate failures. We want to step up and step back, being willing to be transparent and take initiative, but also being recognizing that reflection time and pausing time and just digestion time is important. Make sure you land the plane. If you're going to make a statement, let's figure out where the end is going to be and that the group is with you. And if someone doesn't quite understand where you're going, that we're going to be respectful and thoughtful and excited about asking questions to get clarity. We are a learning community and we want to grow from the strength of the knowledge base that's in this community. Bring your whole person, being present. Thank you to those of you who already said how the video that you reviewed before coming to the meeting, or how getting the resources for today's call have already sparked some conversation for you. Bringing our whole self and being present during our conversations is always a great add. Provide background to the group when necessary and make connections so that we can learn from each other's failures forward and each other's strengths. Recognize that we need to pass the mic as much as possible so that everyone gets to jump in. Lean into discomfort. If something is said that you're not quite connected with directly, maybe it's an opportunity for you to lean in and gather some personal time about more information, but also recognize that learning can sometimes be difficult as well as exciting, and always, always affirming. Be an ally, support each other. We want to stand next to and with and in support of each other in this process, and we want to have fun. So those were all of the elements that we talked about in March. I was talking quickly so that those of us on the phone who aren't looking at this screen can just get a sense of where we were in March and the great list we came up with. I want to acknowledge that since our meeting in March, we did have another colleague share that they would like to add to this list, that we asked for permission from our colleagues before we share details about our stories with other people. That we want to recognize that we have a relationship here on this call and in this group, and that there may be transparent and vulnerable moments for individuals, and before any information is shared outside the group, that we asked for permission. So that was a comment that was brought to Stephanie, and I want to thank our colleagues for bringing it forward, and we wanted to pause here to see if there were any other group agreements that we missed or that folks need clarification about based on what I have shared so far.
Just to add to what Tina shared, I think the comment that we received after the March convening was specifically about moving from small groups to large group conversations. So, you know, when we break out into small groups, conversations might get, you know, really vulnerable or honest. And then when we come back and do full group debriefs, I think there was sort of a concern of like what stays within small groups versus what is allowed to be shared in sort of like a full group debrief, and sort of just the asking permission before you're sharing anyone else's like stories with the larger group, just to make sure that's still okay. So.
Thanks for clarifying that, Stephanie. I see also there was a comment about, is it okay if we share the message but not the messenger? I think still asking as much as possible for permission, also being thoughtful about the context that I might share a difficult exchange that I'm having with colleagues that others around the table might know. So even if you share the message and not the messenger, it might create some difficulty for me. So just asking permission before we share things that are outside this group with others, or from small groups to large groups. So thank you, Stephanie, for making that clarification. Any other additional, I'm checking the chat box while I facilitate, want to make sure if there are any other additional just group norms, agreements we want to revisit before we jump in to today's conversation. All right. Hearing none, we all spent some time. So Stephanie and I are going to play tag team. This piece of our time together works if folks are willing to raise their hand, and I'll queue up. Now, to be very fair, your names we're going to go with the names that are listed in the boxes as we move forward. So we all listened to the Centering Voices of Lived Experience webinar and took a moment to review the Action 3 National Innovation Services resource in preparation for today's call. And we thought we'd start today's conversation with a question. If you were able to listen to the webinar, you notice that there was a conversation between Twiggy and there was one other individual who shared her perspective during the call. That individual talked about the value of a mentor, the value of a coach, the value of a trusted confidant in being an individual with lived experience moving into a foundation setting. Does anybody remember the name of that individual?
Her name was Lorraine, I think.
You are correct, Katie. It was Lorraine. And what was interesting was you had to have a little bit of context in order to know that it was Lorraine, because one of the things that we were leaning into and realizing that the Foundations to End Homelessness has done a great job of bringing up a webinar that gives us a perspective from someone with a lived experience, giving us an opportunity to hear the exchange between the foundation representative and the individual with lived experience. And yet, when we were doing our research, we realized in the title and in the description and in the information, we don't get the name of the person with lived experience. It was a moment where we had made some great opportunities to lift up that voice. And then in the promotion of it, there was an opportunity for strengthening how we continue to validate the lived experience and the leadership and the strength of that perspective as we were moving forward. So as funders, as you were listening to Lorraine's comments and perspectives, we want to start with the individual from the lived experience. What are some of the elements that you remember she mentioned in how she received support, how she felt that trust was developed? What were some of the components that helped to build her capacity, if you will, her excitement about being in this philanthropic space or in this foundation space for the work? Any things you remember from Lorraine's perspective?
Elisa, I see your hand raised.
Hello. So one of the parts that I really appreciated it, kind of Lorraine's comments on there. I thought that were super helpful as somebody who's come from grassroots organizing into a world that's not super familiar to me. I thought it was great when she was saying just having someone that she could reflect and ask questions to and kind of check herself of like, is this, am I feeling like if she was feeling like things were kind of going well or not going well, and just being able to just bounce something off of somebody else first and be able to just get some confidence in being able to then bring it up to other folks within the foundation. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think that is great. As I thought that was useful. Like I didn't have a mentor per se, but I felt that was useful being able to have somebody that you felt comfortable with being able to ask certain questions. And I know when folks have come into philanthropy now, since I've been in, they'll just ask questions too, and it seems like it is very helpful. So I thought that part was interesting and could relate to.
Yes.
Wait, I was okay. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Katie. Yes.
Okay. I mean, I was really struck by just the way that they described the coaches too, that it was not a coach or a mentor from a particular social service agency that might have its own kind of agenda or their own set of goals, but they actually brought in like performance art coaches. So people who coach athletes, or who coach like actors, or like people who are really in the business of developing your whole being so that like it really helps you be at your peak performance. And I just thought that the framework of wellness and really focusing and honing in on what's going to make you as an individual whole and like supporting your wellness, I think was really, it's different than the other models that I've seen. And I thought that was really great, as well as all of her advice around, just the importance of providing context and information so that like if she's asked to participate in whatever, that she fully understands the environment and kind of the context that she's working into, and just a continuous focus on, again, like self-care and well-being, so that it's always about taking care of yourself. Like if you can't, like if you're in an environment like where it's not, like you don't feel like it's promoting your self-care and your wellness, that like you should just walk away, and like, and that really to hone in on that. So the importance of support and really preparation, setting expectations about what's realistic, what's not. I thought those were all really good advice. But I especially really appreciated, again, just the role of coaches and the performance art coaches. I thought that was really cool.
Cricket, were you waving your hand? No. Fair enough. Fair enough. It was one of the components that jumped out for me was Lorraine mentioned that the individual went beyond just about the work, and when a difficulty occurred in her family, that there was a connection, that personal, that authentic relationship, that it went deeper than just the work. And the trust that was developed over time and then reaffirmed mattered for Lorraine as she was thinking about continuing the work. They had a relationship, and it wasn't just transactional. There was authenticity to that. So that was something that jumped out for me. Others? So when we think about our youth advisory boards, when we think about our connection with our fellows, when we think about bringing in individuals with lived experience, it sounds like one of the pieces that came through in the webinar, that opportunity for coaching, opportunity for mentoring, opportunity for understanding content and context, for asking questions in a safe environment, but also for developing those authentic relationships are important components to consider. How do we build that safety, if you will, around our colleagues as they come to the table? I'm trying to see, were there any other elements to Lorraine's comments that jumped out for folks before we move on to a conversation about some of the decisions that the foundation made around compensation?
Hey, this is Julie. I guess I would just say that what I heard in her reflections too is that she was seen sort of as a whole person. And I think just by way of disclosure, to be honest with you, this was really timely for me. I just hired someone who's been part of our campaign that I mentioned, who has lived experience. And, we've been off to a rocky start. And I think there's been sort of a lot of, frankly, women in my office and in the campaign coming together to kind of, we're trying not to use the word mentor, but kind of be buddies, and well as holding that. But those boundaries in terms of professional and humanistic and seeing a person as a whole person are really tough to navigate. And I appreciated her sort of calling that out when she had that situation happen with her son, to really be seen. So anyway, I realized I loaded some things in there that weren't exactly on point. Sorry.
No. All is great. I see someone, 216, looks like they have comments. No? Okay. There's a lot for us to glean from the conversation from Lorraine's perspective. And in part, modeling where we start in the conversation, really wanting to lift up the expertise that Lorraine was bringing to the table to launch us into this conversation. There's lots of ways we can think about this from a systemic basis, from an organizational basis, from a research basis or a data basis, but the voice of the individual on the webinar who has the lived experience has a lot of value that we want to unearth. So Stephanie, why don't I pass it to you?
Yeah, and I think for those of you who are starting to think about including people with lived experience in your grant making process and on advisory boards, I think, I'd love to hear how you are like continuing to think about supporting the whole person and sort of building in that mentoring coaching component, or how you're supporting grantees and doing that. But I think, something that we heard from all of you in March was that, we spent a lot of time developing relationships, but a lot of you wanted to also dig in deeper about, who is actually doing what. And so, in the webinar, Anne and Twiggy talked a lot about paying people with lived experience, and Twiggy recommended having specific funds for this kind of work. And so, I know that all of us know that paying people for their expertise and not through pizza, not through store-specific gift cards is really important. So I'd love to hear from everyone on the line, how are people either funding this work to support people with lived experience to engage in advisory boards and to engage in systems change work? Do you have sort of restricted funding for it? Is it part of like the general grants you give out? And so I'd love to hear a little bit about like who is supporting paying people with lived experience and how that's sort of playing out.
This is Julie. So we, as I mentioned, have a storytellers network that's part of our public will building campaign. And built into that, we have 4 grants. Actually, I think now we're on 5 grants to leaders. They're $5,000 grants. We have a program at the foundation called the Strengthening Neighborhoods Program where we can give out grants to individuals or groups of individuals. So we kind of modeled it after that. And they are really contributing to driving, informing, leading work in the campaign. At the same time, the storytellers started out just doing that, telling their story to really highlight the root causes of homelessness, dispel some of the stereotypes about who experiences homelessness. And for those, every time one of our storytellers went out, they would get a $50 stipend, and we would have a mentor accompany them. We'd pay for all the transportation, if there were meals involved. And that still remains the case, but also paying for their expertise and participation in larger meetings and spaces. So that's sort of what we came up with.
And hi, this is Myra. And so the way that Tipping Point has been doing it with the Chronic Homelessness Initiative is we have a separate funding bucket for the CHI. And so we just carved out a little money for what we're calling community engagement. And so we want to pay folks a living wage. And I think we would love to pay folks cash, especially folks who are either currently experiencing homelessness or formerly. We don't want it to affect their benefits. And so we're trying to figure out ways of either like informing them that if we give them, over $600, and that may affect their benefits if they are enrolled. And so wanting to be really transparent with folks who participate in our advisory board. And so we're going to be developing contracts and make it very explicit to give folks a heads up that this may affect the benefits, and if they don't want it to, then we can cap them at 600. So it's kind of like an unfortunate roll of the dice, but we do want to make sure that we pay folks well. And I think also having conversations at the get-go of like how they wish to be compensated. So if they do want gift cards or if they do want checks, making sure that we accommodate them however we can.
And I'm really glad that you're offering that choice because I think, Elisa just offered a comment in the chat box, and Danny, I see you're raising your hand, but wanted to see if Elisa, you wanted to sort of expound on your comment in the chat box, or if there's anything that you sort of dealt with or experienced at the Meyer Memorial Trust.
No, I just echo Myra's comments on there. I think they were spot on. So.
Great, thanks. Danny.
Thank you, Stephanie. We've had a bit of an interesting history in terms of our support for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities in Canada. And previously, we provided most of our funding to external organizations that were doing service provision in community. And we are driving towards a model in which we're funding the communities themselves who are able to hire the external service provider that's best for them, so that they are able to take their administration fee and be able to do their own assessment of the project and its success. So we're happy to be moving towards that model. In 2018, we were able to grant to 3 Indigenous communities, and we're hoping for more this year. So really looking to fund the communities themselves as opposed to external folks who are wanting to go into community to provide programming.
Great. Casey, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I wasn't. I'm not asking for permission. We are lucky. We, along with Melville, get to fund Twiggy's work at Colors, and then
Casey, you are cutting out.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're lucky to, along with Melville and others, fund Twiggy's work at True Colors, as well as similar work at the state level with the Mockingbird Society, which drives policy change by centering the experiences and young people with lived experience, both in foster care and juvenile justice and homelessness, and just incredibly effective. Just having a really impactful legislative session, and also work through HUD's grants to communities around youth homelessness, where they've required them to set up youth advisory boards. We've been able to add on to that to some extent. I think a couple of challenges that I'm seeing is one, maybe not surprisingly, like advocacy work. It's hard to convince public funders to take this on. It's hard to, I think, maybe for them to justify centering the voices of people with lived experience because of the way all of our public systems are set up and structures are set up to continue to give power to people who already have power. And then two, maybe a smaller one, but jumping on top of some of the comments about being careful about the impact on other public benefits, is I'm starting to hear some comments from young people themselves, as well as groups of young people, about the interesting inequities in pay structures. So a corporation will come in and pay them $50 an hour, and then the nonprofit that has been paying $25 an hour isn't able to sustain that, and then others will pay $15 an hour, and so these inequities creating. I mean, if I were a young person, I'd go for where the $50 is, but there can be a kind of destructive inequity in pay that can be pushed by a lot of us private funders and corporations that can actually pull young people away from other important work that they're doing.
Yeah, I was just reading the chat box. Yeah, so I'd love to hear if anyone has any sort of response or comment to that, or if anyone who is sort of like thinking about either including people with lived experience in their work or creating or supporting their grantees in doing that. If there are any questions or challenges that you're grappling with that you would like your colleagues to weigh in on, because it seems like there's some, there are some really great thoughts happening here. And if not, I think that might also be a good segue into sort of the next set of questions we had, which Tino will ask while I answer some questions in the chat box.
Sounds good. So Casey mentioned the youth homelessness demonstration project that was sponsored by HUD, that Twiggy, discussed on the webinar. And one of the ahas that jumped out for Stephanie and I was just to think through if HUD can make a requirement that their organizations must include individuals with lived experience, either through a youth advisory board or through some type of community engaged voice. How many of us on the line work with our foundations to embed that requirement in our work? If everyone does it, great. If you don't do it, what are some of the reasons why it might not be on your radar? For those of you that are doing it well, what were the steps that you put in place in order to make that an embedded part of how you approached your grant making? So similar to what HUD was requiring for its grant work, that individuals from lived experience were a part of the process, either in the design of the work, in the implementation of the work, in the data collection of the work, in the analysis and communication of the work. There are many places and many ways that individuals with lived experience can be a part of this relationship between funder and grantee. And I would like to pause here to see what are people's experience with the kind of structural piece of embedding for our grantees an opportunity to engage those with lived experience as part of our criteria. Any experience in that arena on the line?
This is Courtney. I don't know how to wave at you because I don't see a wave thing on.
It's all yours.
So we're grappling with this right now, and there's not a foundation in the Twin Cities that we know of that is doing a really strong job of this. So it's great to hear what everybody's talking about, because we're planning on putting this into the work that we're doing. But one of the things that I came out of from the March meeting was how to get beyond numbers, get beyond diversity, and get to equity. And so one of the things that we've changed in our LOI process that will then feed into our application is the question around how was this program developed? Who's at the table? And we've actually already heard from folks, well, our board got together, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's not going to work. And how are organizations, including people with lived experience, as they're developing programming, as they're prioritizing programming. So it's a very little step, but we've started there as a way to kind of to expand beyond just the diversity questions.
Courtney, I have a question for you. So when, when grantees are coming back to you, or potential grantees are coming back to you and saying, like, our board got together and came up, like, brainstormed this idea, and, you said that that's not going to fly. Is that a conversation you're going back to grantees or prospective grantees? And are you having a conversation with them about, like, that's not what we're looking for, or what's the follow-up from?
Yeah, we are having those kind of conversations. We're also we've been doing information sessions where we go out in the community and meet with potential grantees to answer questions. So we kind of present on the program, very informal, and then we just stick around and answer questions, have conversations. And when folks are talking about, how they've developed their program and, our board or our leadership came up with this idea, then we're pushing back and really we're talking about that we are going to be looking for the experience, the expertise of people with lived experience in the programs that we fund. And thus far, we've gotten, some people push back, but in saying well, it's so hard, but in general, it's been good feedback.
I think we have Danny next with hands raised.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. One of the things that is exciting about Courtney, what you're sharing is that even within your community where not a lot of funders are taking on the approach of integrating individuals with lived experience, your foundation is taking the first steps to set perhaps a different narrative for your region. Others on the line that do have a stated and expected engagement of those with lived experience in your current grant requirements or your LOI requirements. Anyone want to talk about your work and how it was established and how you use it now?
Hi, this is Becca from Melville, and I'm not really going to answer that question, but I'm going to talk about a baby step. So we don't require that in our grant making right now, but we do recognize the importance of our grantees listening to the people that they serve, and know that that's also very difficult for organizations to do. They try it and then don't really incorporate the feedback into their work. So we had four of our workforce boards in Connecticut apply for and receive funding from the Listen for Good grant, which is part of the Fund for Shared Insight, and is a tool that comes with technical assistance on how to better listen to the customers you serve through Net Promoter Score and whatnot. But I have been incredibly thrilled working with Fund for Shared Insight and how they do their work. And it is one of those things that is getting closer to how important it is to listen to feedback and then also incorporate it in how to make changes in your program. If anyone hasn't heard of them, they are fantastic.
Excellent. Well, if you have information about the organization that you either like to put in the chat box or send to Stephanie after the call, we'll make sure to include that information as resource material for folks after the call. Anyone else that has engaged in baby steps or big steps in the space of including those with lived experience, either as part of your structure to your LOI? I see Matthew raising his hand. You're on mute, Matthew. Take it away.
All right. I have an even smaller baby step that was sort of discontinued, but it showed some promise. So we're not a grant maker ourselves for homelessness work, but we had a diversity internship program with some digital content. So we are sort of practicing what we were preaching and paying interns to do work so that we could have a diverse group of interns come and learn and then go out into the community. But the modest funding that was needed for that was not continued, and the organization has not yet decided to find other money to do that. They think that unpaid interns are just as helpful. So it had not yet gotten institutionalized, but some people were realizing the value of it and how that embodied an equitable approach. So I'm hoping we can resume that baby step soon and start practicing what a lot of the principles we're talking about are.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I remember that during our opening remarks, someone on the line said that they were really excited about the fact that you have Voices of Lived Experience in I think it was the Foundation review panel process. I can't remember who it was on the line who shared that was something that you were excited about. Can that individual just share how you got to that space and how long you've been incorporating individuals' lived experience in your selection and review process, and what were some of the learning elements from that?
So this is Cricket. I think it was me.
Very good.
Well, we just started, so we haven't. Our first initial step, which I think wasn't a huge success, was around we were requiring like a customer service well, we did require about 3 years ago some kind of customer voice or something. It was really before my time. I came when they were in the middle of it. There was a lot of community conversation around what the survey would look like and how to get surveys across all of the different groups. And then there was a bunch of fighting amongst the providers around what the wording on the survey would be. So I don't suggest that as a way to do it. So for this, what we're doing, I'm in kind of a unique situation right now. I've been named a fellow with the Knowledge Exchange for Resilience at Arizona State University. And part of that is a whole other thing I can tell you guys about sometime. But part of that is they're giving the organization some money to compensate really for my time in the fellowship.
Okay.
And so I said that I would just do all my work plus the fellowship if we could put the money towards this Voice of Lived Experience thing, is what I don't remember what I even called it. But that we wanted people on the review panel and that we wanted to be sure to give them whatever they needed to feel successful on the panel on the front end, compensate them for their time, and then hopefully spin it off into a standing sort of, in United Way terms, speakers bureau or some kind of opportunity for them to continue to participate in the community at large, even with our providers themselves. So we just got to where that's basically been approved. So we come up with a criteria on how we're going to move forward. We have a fairly short timeline, so we think it'll be, I'm looking at 20 people, I think.
Very good.
That we'd like to be able to engage. And it'll be like building the plane when you're flying, and we want to be super careful that we're most importantly being aware of the people that we're including, that they feel respected and honored and empowered to have a voice in the process, that they're not just sitting in a room letting the corporate volunteers who normally do the ranking and review. And so I don't know, we'll just see. That's the best I can tell you right now. I will give you guys, as soon as we come up with the actual process we're going to go through to recruit these folks, then I will share that with everyone.
Thank you for sharing, Cricket, and thank you for being willing to share some of the details when I put you on the spot. So I appreciate that. In our chat box, I noticed that our colleagues from PetSmart, still the mute-unmute is being a challenge, but they are taking baby steps. So PetSmart charities in the U.S. taking baby steps with a big challenge being informing, convincing the leadership of the value of pushing our grantees to listen to the communities they propose to serve and providing solid guidance on what that listening could and should look like. So even when the foundation staff are ready to move with more intentionality, is what I'm hearing around getting grantees to bring community members, voices into the process, that there's still a process for convincing leadership of the organizations that that's of value. I think I'm quickly looking in the chat box as well to see if there was, it might be good to hear from Adrian or Jody from Meyer, who are now on the line. I can see you, Adrian. I see your video. Want to make sure that you get a chance to weigh in here and say hello.
Hi, yeah. This is outside of our work in supporting homelessness, but it's really connected. We have a small grant program area that's really focused on supporting basic needs, and we do that through very, very small $5,000 grants to community organizations that are meeting basic needs, whether it's housing, food, emergency, medical equipment, utilities of that nature. And we've had a lot of ups and downs with this program area. It's a huge
capacity list on our foundation for perhaps very little impact. And so this year, we're looking at input from a couple of different levels. We're going to be looking at sort of the policy level levers that connect with some of the basic needs and how we might advocate differently. We're also asking partners some different questions, including, one of the questions that we ask in our application is what's your relationship with the community that you serve? Which of course is from their perspective. But then I think the thing I'm most excited about is pulling in voices of people with lived experience and perhaps folks that have been recipients of some of these basic needs supports, and really getting an understanding of how the social fabric is impacting them as a way to sort of guide and shift how we might think about supporting basic needs. So I'm really, I think we've maybe had a pulse a little bit more deeply on the first two, the policy levers and the grantees, the partners who are doing the work. And I'm really excited to hear, and I'll share with you later this year how that kind of comes out from community members' perspective.
Very good. Thank you so much for sharing. I didn't know if Todd wanted to weigh in here as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to weigh in with a question and not with any good advice, but I think, two things come to mind. I mean, and one is I think that we are really trying to support stakeholder engagement, and particularly for those who lived experience at our COC level. And that's work that the COC, here that the coalition is, trying to strengthen the way that they do that. And we're also trying to strengthen the way that the coalition engages, kind of a broad range of stakeholders in general. We also, that some of our providers are really good at this, and we know who those providers are. But the conversation we're having here about how to do that in our grant making, how to ask those questions of grantees, that feels like that feels like a real stretch for us at this point. I think my question is, and we can take this offline, but I would love to know more about, folks who ask that question as part of the grant making process. What do you do with that information? So are folks, requiring engagement of lived experience? Are they sort of scoring that those answers against other requests that don't from organizations that don't do that work? So asking that question is a sort of a statement of the value that you place in that in general, but what do you do with the information and how to use it to make decisions about grants?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Todd. And I think that might be a really good question for follow-up over email. And I think since we have 5 minutes left in this call, I sort of want to make sure we have some time to wrap things up. But I think, you can expect after this call that I'll send out a follow-up email, as I do, with bullet points and links to all of the materials you could ever want. But I think that question, Todd, might be a really good one to pose in that follow-up email, to have folks maybe try and start a conversation virtually to share sort of what they do with that information. I'll also share that during our next monthly call on May 28th, Mark Jones will be joining us, and we'll sort of be continuing this conversation and looking specifically around the work that the National Innovation Service, which used to be called Future Laboratories, what they've been doing in Seattle and King County. And it'll also be an opportunity for all of us to ask some really deep, thoughtful questions of him. And then, let's see. And then also, by way of follow-up, I know that I sent out like 20 billion calendar invites a couple of weeks ago with all of these monthly call dates, but I just wanted to confirm that we have set the dates for our October convening, which is going to be October 23rd and 25th in Chicago. That first day will be overlapping with another Funders Together community of practice. We have another one that's been looking at the intersection of employment and housing. And so on the first day of our convening in October, we'll be meeting up with that community of practice to do some joint learning and meaning making, knowledge sharing. And so we're really excited about that. And then I alluded to this at the beginning of the call, but several of you asked for ways to be accountable to one another and to continue to tap into each other's knowledge and brain trust for problem solving and advice and things like that. So shortly after the follow-up email, I will be introducing you to your home teams, which will, in the home teams, we'll use these groups to bounce ideas off of one another, to do case consultations and things like that. I've sort of tried to group people that I think are compatible or at similar types of foundations or doing similar types of work. So hopefully that will sort of just be another avenue to dig a little bit deeper. And then also, if anyone has any feedback on sort of the like logistics of raising your hand, waving at us, like please let us know. We're still trying to figure out like the best way to just like keep conversation going without having like everyone talk over one another. But with that being said, just checking the chat box. I see that Katie posed a question and that there are a couple of folks. Okay, there are a couple of questions in the chat box. All of the things in the chat box, like we'll have a record of, so I'll make sure that they get sent out afterwards, along with the recording of this video and all of the notes and things like that. So one last logistical question from Myra is on this group's method of communication. Right now, we do have the email listserv. Based off of survey results, people are willing to give Slack a try, so I'm currently looking into the back end of that. I see some faces that look excited and some faces that are like, oh my God, what? I'm working out the kinks of that, so stay tuned. All right, so we have 1 minute left. If anyone has anything burning that they want to share or say or ask the group, please do so now before we close the call. Alrighty, well then it was really, really fantastic to see all of you. Thank you to everyone who was able to share their video. I really appreciate it. You guys are all beautiful, wonderful people. All of your hair looks great, so you don't have to worry about that. And I look forward to seeing all of your faces in a month on May 28th. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a good day.